World's Worst Radio Show, April 4th. mvajoshua here. I'm going to put on a record. Greyhouse, Fabric, split 7-inch. This is the Greyhouse side. Don't remember what this band sounds like. I think they sound like Hoover. We'll find out. So far, so good. Elijah, what's up? We're listening to this Greyhouse Fabric split 7-inch Simba Records, 1993 or 4 maybe. Bored. Sorry to hear that. Hopefully I'm going to alleviate your boredom. Let's see. We're going to listen to records and talk about what are we going to talk about? We're going to talk about throwing out rule books of how things are supposed to be done. And you'll have to be my sound man. Can you hear me over the music? One more for the tube. A little loud? Okay, we're gonna bring it down. Wonder. Move this guy back a little. Paul Danhauser was cracking. Troy was cracking. Listening to a Greyhouse record, and then unless there are questions related to creative stuff, I got an idea for a topic in a song from now. Alex Delker, what's up? I think I want to talk about throwing out the rule books of how things are supposed to be done. I've developed this bizarro technique of situating things differently for different uses. So like, the iPad has to be further away from the speaker, but the iPhone needs to be kind of right near the speaker. Very weird. I kind of like this record. Kind of Fugazi-ish. I don't know what year it is. I think it's 93. Nope, 94. Nothing inside it. Bullshit. To anyone that follows me on YouTube, there are 2 episodes of this poorly produced radio show there right now on my YouTube as World's Worst Radio Show. And I am totally down to take questions or commentary, but otherwise I got a plan. So, this record was in the sell pile, but I'm feeling it. Giant piece of dust on it. It's like a dust bunny across the vinyl. I like that. If you're buying a CD from me, just make sure you quarantine it for a week since my wife's got the corona. Alright, we're going to listen to Fabric side. Fabric were like a UK indie rock band in the kind of 90s. Not the kind of 90s, in the 90s. We'll see if this is any good. If it's not good, we'll start talking about stuff. So far, so good. Elijah, you should buy any record you ever think about buying. You can always sell it later. I never listen to verses, but I think you should buy at least one of them. She's doing all right. It's hard to shake. Like, she's been sick for like 3 weeks. She keeps thinking that she's getting better, but then, like, she's in a dark room sleeping right now. Alright, I'm feeling this record. So, it's just one of those things. But I think the hard thing is that I gotta work during the day, and at best I can sort of distract kids, but they're so distracting that it's hard. So we'll see. This record's dope though, I gotta say. If anybody has a request, throw it in. Laura, hey. We're listening to this Fabric 7-inch from 1994, and then we're going to talk about throwing out the rule books of creative endeavors. Though I'm always open to questions too. Questions get priority over whatever crap I plan on talking about. Cool to find something quiet to talk over though. Let's see what we got here. What do you mean by focal points? We have a question. Do focal points matter with album covers? I need to know what it means. About... we won't talk over a record. I will say this. The sanity maker for getting through, yes, actual records. So what happens is to kill awkward silences, I play records, but I don't buy records anymore, so I discover if the records I own are any good. If there's any questions about creative stuff, I'm happy to answer them. Creative process, creative block, workflow, procrastination, motivation, all of that stuff. Nathan Motzko, what's cracking? Okay, that's what we'll go with. Though I'm going to ask a counter question in terms of how do you get motivated. Do you suffer from lack of motivation, or are you just curious to know how other people get going? While we think about that. The Starbucks Via, not the one for iced coffee. That's gross. Just straight Starbucks Via makes the best iced coffee. And you can survive without Starbucks. Alright. I think that that's kind of a good place to start. I don't suffer from a lack of inspiration or lack of motivation, but I used to. I never used to suffer from a lack of inspiration. I always had inspiration and ideas. And anyone that went to school with me had the curse of probably seeing how many ideas I had. That said, none of those ideas came to life. I was gonna say I had a lack of motivation, but I was motivated. I just couldn't get myself to make the things that I was thinking about making. So, at least for me, what I've kind of eventually unraveled is I naturally have lots of ideas and inclinations, and they manifest themselves in a variety of ways. But the motivation thing, for me, there tends to be a couple of things that have to be at play in order for me to do a project. So one is If the project is not of my own making, then I need money. There has to be money involved. I don't want to do anything that isn't like more or less 100% fun if money isn't on the table. There's exceptions to that, but not heavily. So I might do something as a favor. I have to genuinely want to do it for the person, and I have to have faith in them that they have faith in me that we'll get somewhere good. And so I can get something out of that. Like I can help the person, but at the same time, like as a designer, I don't really want to help anyone. Because if I really wanted to help them, I probably wouldn't do any graphic design for them. I'd probably go and make money and then send them checks, and that would be great, right? So like there's a degree to which I want to help people. It's self-serving no matter what, and I'm kind of aware of that. So that said, if we're not talking about those kinds of projects that involve money, which helps motivate me but isn't the only motivator for that kind of stuff, and we're talking about these like personal projects. And when it comes to the personal projects, there's basically a number of things that have to be in play that will get me to work. The first is the act in and of itself has to be enjoyable. Now, what I have come to realize is that I have to approach it in a way that guarantees that it's enjoyable. So whether it's writing music, doing design stuff, doing something bizarre like this, whatever it is I'm doing, I have to make sure that I approach it in a way that makes it fun. Because I'm already doing stuff to make money during the day, and that stuff very often is not fun. So I have to make sure it's fun. So like this is fun. This is fun to do. Play records, talk to people, hopefully offer something of value. Very fun. The way I write music is fun. The way I do graphic design is fun. Everything I do it in a way that's fun. Even if the results to other people might not seem like it. Like a vlog about addiction might not seem fun to other people, but the making of it was enjoyable. I went for a walk and I talked about something I cared about, and I did it in a very casual, enjoyable way. So there's fun. Then there's the tools have to be kind of cheap and stupid. I like to start with everything being as low quality and as dumb or as easy to get as possible. It took me a long time to realize this. I used to be like one of those people that when they wanted to do something, they'd research it and then they'd go and buy a bunch of stuff. Like that's like how I would do it. I'd be like, oh, well, I need this thing to make music, and I'd buy some piece of software and I'd buy like another piece of equipment, but then I wouldn't use it. And the thing I've realized now is that like I like things that are dumb and as cheap as possible, and then if I get addicted to it, I'll upgrade. So like I already like doing this bizarro radio show idea, kind of want to buy a mixer and a microphone. I'm not going to, but I'm tempted to. So fun, stupid, easy tool. And then the other thing is I need to be able to integrate it into my life in a way where it doesn't feel like work. So this thing, set it up on the table. I'm still technically within like the normal working hours. I might jump off if a bunch of emails pile up and something urgent comes up. But in general, I've been managing my work day to where I can carve out this hour. I can start a little bit earlier. I can skip lunch. I can do these things. So I do all this stuff so that it fits into my everyday life. Most of like when I do my own graphic design, it happens while watching TV. I write music while watching TV, or in the bathroom, as the case may be. Trying to think of other stuff like that. The way I make photography is like I have these stupid bags of trash, and I sit on the stoop in my front porch and drink coffee, and I photograph the bag, and that's how I make photography. For a while I shot these photos of trees, because where I would do vlogs was surrounded by trees, and I was like, well, I got nothing else to make a photo of, trees it is. So that's to me the kind of three big factors. And I guess the fourth one is the way I approach it, which is I almost never have a goal. I have a thing I'm doing, but I don't get super bummed out if things don't work out. Like there's lots of vlogs that never got published because they just didn't work. It never came together in the way that I needed it to. So I'm not worried about stuff. I actually don't even need to like stuff. It's kind of bizarre. Like what I just described, now to some people what I just described is a nightmare, but to me what I just described is all my creative activities are hobbies. You could like probably make the argument that I'm a workaholic, except that this stuff doesn't make me miserable. It makes me super fun. And the stuff that I do for money, I really do want to stop. Like, I don't want to be sitting there working on stuff that the only real value in it is that I'm being paid to do it. So I'm hyper motivated to do the things that I want to do, and I'm not super attached to any one of them. That's kind of the big thing for me, is that you make sure that all the pieces work in a way where it's a close race between which thing is more fun to do. Like, is it more fun to watch Netflix, or is it more fun to do graphic design or make music or edit videos? And for me, it's like, it used to be watching Netflix was way up here, this other stuff was way down here. It was stuff I had to do, but it wasn't stuff that was fun. Now it's changed to where they kind of sit on the same level, and if anything, there's a lot of stuff I do in place of making more art, but that's because, you know, if I'm hanging out watching a movie with my family, I'm spending time with my family, and they appreciate that I'm there, and they'll get annoyed if I pop open the laptop and start designing, or if I put my headphones on and start making music. But the reality is that, like, it doesn't matter what movie I'm watching, I kind of would rather be making stuff. For me, that's kind of how motivation works. I think there's this inverse to it, which is that, like, you can either be contextual about it, or you can be goal-oriented about it. And typically, I think we're taught to be goal-oriented. Like, if I do this thing, I will get what I want. Therefore, I must force myself to do it. And I think the problem is a lot of people aren't wired that way. And like, I made a video recently about artists who are addicts. I think in general, addicts aren't wired that way, and a lot of artists are addicts. And so you end up with this kind of problem, which is like the world tells you that this is the way to be motivated, but it turns out like I'm not super motivated to do stuff for some payoff down the line. About as motivated as I've been recently is to make sure to clean out the coffee maker the night before, because it's a hassle to do it when I'm tired in the morning. That's about as far forward I can think. So I have to be contextual. Like, I have to work like an addict. I don't work like an adult that has their shit together per se. But then because it's the right way for me, I get results and I'm extremely gratified. Hopefully there's something in there that might be helpful to you, but at the very least, that's how I work and that's how I approach this kind of stuff. Okay, Nathan's got a good question. Can you talk on working collaboratively and how you handle a passion project not going entirely your way? That is something I've been running into working with some friends. Yeah, so one, obviously I've been down this road. I think it's really hard not to have been down this road, but I've definitely been down that road. So there's a bunch of things. One, it's not going to be true for everybody, but like, here's the thing I think about. If I was going to start a company with someone, it'd be a really good idea if everybody in the company didn't do the same stuff. But like, what does everyone do? 3 graphic designers start a company together, and lo and behold, there's creative conflicts. Whereas it's like, what you need is like different zones. And the problem is that, like, a lot of times you're attracted to people who are going to do a thing that's similar to what you're doing, but that can be really tough. Now, that's not 100% true, right? Like, very few TV shows get written by one person, but I do think that there's an aspect of that to it. I think that if you're going to collaborate with people, if you're really going to do it in a way that makes you happy, that then the ideal situation is that everyone is going to look for the joy in the collaboration and is going to be willing to not worry about the outcome. And I think I talk about this way too much. So if you go on my YouTube, you can just find videos where I endlessly talk about the influence of the band Self-Defense Family on me and the way that I work and the way I think about work. But this big thing I pulled from them was their idea of, when they make a record, it's whatever members of the band can be there to make the record. No one has any say on what anyone else does. Like, somebody's got a guitar part, somebody starts playing a guitar part, and then someone adds to that, and someone else adds the drums. And then the way that the singer works with the band is he writes the lyrics while the rest of the band's at dinner. So they finish the song, he writes the lyrics, and then he records them, and the band really doesn't have any input on what he's doing, and he doesn't get to be like, yo, this sucks, I hate this, I'm not singing on it. Everyone has to accept the fruits of the labor, and as a result of that, it seems to be a band that's very happy to make work. And like, they're like a band that has a problem of they make too many records, and record labels ask them, hey, can you slow down a little bit, because you're screwing up the ability of any of these labels to sell the records. Because this is a band that if they wanted to, if they had the financial freedom, they'd probably write a full album a month. So that's a spirit that makes a lot of sense to me. That's not how I thought about these things. So if you're goal oriented, it's real hard to collaborate. It's better to be the boss, I think. But if the goal is to make a thing and see what happens, I think it's a different scenario. And maybe there's a project I'm working on right now with a friend where we're reissuing a record. And in general, we want to use the existing artwork. And I think part of my motivation is me and the friend, we're both designers and we both have record labels. We don't have to fight about the artwork if we don't make artwork. You know, it's like a path of least resistance, which is often seen as a negative thing, but I think in general, if the project's worth working on, the path of least resistance is going to get you somewhere. The path of least resistance is a problem when the project sucks to begin with. Like when you work in a corporation and they take the path of least resistance, well, that's a problem because they're making bullshit to begin with half the time. But when you're making something that matters, I think you can get away with the path of least resistance, because that's going to mean that like you find a way to do this thing, the thing's already worth doing and it's already good, and you just got to figure out how to get to the end without making a piece of crap. That seems doable to me. In general, like here's a good example. I teach at a design program. The party line dogma these days is like students need to be taught collaboration, and my party line is fuck collaboration. 9 times out of 10 it sucks and it doesn't work, and I don't want to collaborate with anyone in general, so I'm the last person in the world. Like I ran collaborative projects before in class. I made the mistake of doing it twice. Never again. I will never have students do something that I myself wouldn't want to do. And I think, you know, some people are loners, some people are social, some people want to just do their own thing, some people want to be the benevolent dictator, and some people want to be straight up collaborators. All are right. You just got to find the zone that you're supposed to be in. Let's find a record. I think what we'll do, we're going to play one song, see if it's any good, and then I got some additional thoughts that relate to this topic. Oh wait, let's play this Dawnbreed 7-inch. Glad that helps. I mean, it's hard. It took me a long time to realize that like half the time I wasn't collaborating with anybody because I didn't want to. Or like a good example is me and Dan Black, whenever we do posters together, we make the weirdest shit in the world. And I always think what's going to happen is that Dan's precision is going to rub off on me. But what ends up happening is we get so weird. Like weirder than I would normally get, and way weirder than Dan would normally get. And if you're not open to it, you know, if I was really hardcore, like working with Dan, I'm going to make this beautiful, it's going to be like a 7-color screen print with a lot of drawing, and it's going to be very like detail-y. If I went into it and was like, this is what has to happen, then it'd be a failure. I think that's going to happen, and then it gets somewhere bizarre, and I'm like, all right, this is what we're doing. Sounds good. So let's see. We got this Dawnbreed 7-inch. I don't know what year this is. 1997, 1998. Got a beautiful cover. I mean, very 90s kind of, God, what's the phrase for this? Displaced nostalgia aesthetic. But still nice. I bet it's a 33. Let's find out. I have no idea what this is going to sound like. I haven't listened to this band since 1998. 33. And I think I'm gonna listen to this side of this thing, see if it's good, and then add on to this a little bit. This is cool. Add on to it a little bit about the idea of abandoning rules and how that helps with a lot of this stuff. Kind of sassy. Thanks for the questions and comments. I think a lot of people make themselves miserable by having some very specific thing. I think one of the greatest moments of collaboration I've ever heard of is the band Lungfish. They were on Discord, somewhat of a big band in the early 90s. They had actually done a world tour with Joan Jett. So they could have been a huge sort of like alt-rock band. And the guitarist, drummer, and singer started pushing in a different direction that was more drony and repetitive, and definitely not the kind of band that was going to be touring the world with Joan Jett. And the bass player quit the band so that they could do that thing, because he thought they needed to, but he didn't want to. And I thought, like, that's one of the most generous gestures that someone has ever made to someone in the like imagine the way that you collaborate is you say, I'm going to recuse myself from this because my presence will ruin it and it won't allow what needs to happen, and I won't be happy with it. And I think that's fascinating. I think when you see documentaries with bands, you see how often young people in particular, because like when you're young, your ego works differently. There's this laundry list of things you want to do. So when you start a project, you have a specific vision because it's on this big ass list of stuff you need to do. But so many bands, they implode in part because of everyone's specific vision. And then what's funny is, they get back together 15 years later and everyone's let go of that, and then they're able to start working again because everyone's less intense about what they want, and instead it's more like, well, let's see what happens. This record is awesome. So the original thing I was thinking about, and I think it plays into what I've just talked about, is the idea of abandoning as many quote-unquote rules. Because in reality, there's no rules to these creative endeavors that we do. There's just these agreed-upon set of things that allow you to get to a level that's considered acceptable or professional, at what everyone has agreed is the way to do it. I think I'm both incredibly productive and incredibly lazy. As we sit here, there's like 2 more long MVA videos that need to go up. There's 5 videos from my personal YouTube that need motion graphics added to them before they're done. Then there's a pile of stuff that needs captions to go up on Instagram. And then there's like an episode of the radio show that's uploading to YouTube right now, another one that's being edited, and then there is a Halifax song that was supposed to come out March 13th or something, but I just forgot. So it's like sitting on Bandcamp in draft mode. I'm wearing a Halifax shirt that I ordered a sample of. It looks great, I'm happy, but I haven't put it up for sale yet. Just this massive pile of stuff. Like I get a lot of shit done for someone who watches a lot of TV. Like I watch a fuckload of TV. But one of the contradictions is that I just don't think I have a lot of rules governing anything I do. The idea of posting these on YouTube as a radio show was, it's not like I wanted to make a radio show. It was more like, I'm doing this, sometimes there's not that many questions, but there's people on, I need something to do. Initially I was going to fold laundry. That was going to be my concept. I'll fold laundry and I'll talk to people. And then I didn't have enough laundry to fold. So then I was like, all right, well, fuck it, I'll play records. And then I recorded them thinking I'll take the chunks between the records and those will be videos. Those might work as videos. And then it turned out, listen to the full recording and be like, you can kind of hear the records and they don't sound bad. It doesn't sound as good as the actual record, but it doesn't sound that bad. There's so many levels to this where they're just wrong. Like, this is the setup, just to be clear. Cheap shit record player into one of those JBL things, recorded to an iPhone. No microphone, no line in, no cords, no nothing. Everything about this is bad and wrong according to like a whole bunch of rules, but the reality is that it works. The reality is that it's good enough and it's set up in a way that makes my life very easy. Like, my kid needs to be able to do homework at this table, so I can't have all this stuff out. So at 3:45 I just set stuff up, grab a bunch of records. I never did a test like, oh, will this work or whatever. I just make stuff and then I figure out from what I've made, what do I feel like adjusting? What don't I like? What do I like? So on and so forth. I realized it's highly irritating that I was constantly taking the needle off records. So I kind of like figured that out. But I don't feel bad about that because like you're supposed to play the record. I just feel bad about it because I listened to it and I was like, oh, I wanted to hear the rest of the song. I think that in everything I do, it's not breaking the rules on purpose. I've just decided that everyone's rules, they can apply to everyone else. They don't apply to me. No fucking rules about creative anything apply to me. I try as hard as possible to more or less disregard my entire creative education, except for foundation year of art school, where you make a whole bunch of stuff, you know that it all sucks, you make it anyway, and that if you have a bunch of heady concepts, you more than likely have ruined it. And because of that, one, I'm super productive, but if I wasn't happy with it, then it wouldn't matter if I was super productive. But the thing is that for however long, I was not creatively gratified. I was a miserable human being because I was trying to do this stuff. I was trying to be goal-oriented, but I wasn't wired in a way where I really cared if I reached the goal. You know, it's like, okay, I wrote a book. Well, it turns out like writing a book isn't hard. You want to sell the book. But then it's like all the effort selling the book is I can't make other stuff. But then when I'd make other stuff, I would just make myself miserable. And that was this big thing that I wrestled with for like a long time. I was that classic kind of art school student where I skated by on ambition and communication, not on work. I did not get good grades based on the work because I could barely finish anything because I drove myself insane overthinking every last thing. And then I did that up until, I don't know, the real shift is probably not that long ago. 2016 is probably like when things really shifted. And then all of a sudden it was like I made art all the time and I was happier. Like when my older child was like a baby, I was working on all these books and I couldn't spend time with her and I was so stressed out and frustrated and I needed this thing to be successful because I was wasting too much time on it. Now, the way that I do stuff, I don't think it detracts from my children's life. I think it adds to it. Like, you know, I'm sure lots of kids have these parents who are artists that are like these intense motherfuckers that need to be in a studio for 14 hours a day and they drink a lot because they're stressed themselves out and they're not around. And it's like, I don't have any of that kind of pathos. And in general, it's because I have no standards and I have no expectations of the things that I'm doing. And I just feel like I'm not governed by rules. Because of that, I have a ton of fun, and I move at my own pace, and I make things at my own pace. And I tend to judge everything based on what it is, not on what's the expectation. Like, I'm gonna go listen to this live in context as soon as it's ready. Like, not the YouTube video, but this video. I'm gonna listen to this and see how it went. Then I'll listen to this other video and see how that turned out. And I'll course correct, not based on, oh, well, you know, you should really do this, that, or the other thing. I'm gonna course correct on, oof, that hurts my ears, or oof, that's not loud enough, or man, you ruined that song by talking through it. And they think that's kind of a big part of it, is that, like, I'm constantly course correcting, but I shouldn't say I've never, I haven't asked anyone what they thought about a goddamn thing in at least 8 years, if not longer. I don't care what anybody thinks about anything. I share work with people because I'm enthusiastic about it, but I do not ask anyone, what do you think? Because what you think, what anyone else thinks, is irrelevant. I'm going to do what I do, and I'm going to course correct on my own. And then sometimes what's going to happen is I'm going to find out a rule, and I'm going to have enough reference experience to be like, oh, that's why that works that way. That's how I teach typography. Like, I don't teach any rules whatsoever. I only talk about conventions when I think it's necessary to make sure the student understands this is the convention. When you go out into the world, this is going to be an opinion you have to deal with. I just want you to know it exists, and I want you to have a response to it. But I don't think you need to abide by that convention. And that is a explosion of thoughts on the rules. And I hope something in there is useful. And that gets you to the level of production that you want to be at. God, I'm going to keep going. There's a big thing happening right now. Like, the stupid ass New York Times had this article about, no, you don't have to be productive during the coronavirus self-isolation lockdown. Well, first off, you don't have to be productive at any point, at any time, if you don't want to. But the insinuation is that a whole bunch of people realize they have extra time, and they want to make stuff, but they can't make stuff. And then they feel bad about it. And a whole bunch of soft nerds are telling them, well, don't feel bad about it. You don't have to make stuff. But here's the thing. Those people want to make stuff. They want to be productive. And the problem is that they're governed by rules that are getting in the way of taking advantage of this time. I think if you're watching this, maybe you don't have a commute anymore. 2 hours of your day just opened up. So you go like, oh, 2 hours of my day opened up. I want to use that. I want to make something. And then you can't make something. You have something to make, but you can't make forward progress. You can't think of what to make. Ever the answer is, the opening up of time and you not being able to work, it's got nothing to do with you being stressed about coronavirus. If you're constantly thinking, I want to make stuff, and then you're not making stuff, the opening up of time has revealed the holes in your process, period. That's what it's done. Because, like, you want to make stuff. Now, if what's actually happening is the space is opened up and you're thinking, well, it seems like everyone else is productive, I should be productive, but then you feel bad about it. That's just as stupid as telling someone who knows deep down that they should be doing some shit right now and then they're not. Me telling that person that doesn't want to do that stuff, no, you should be productive, that's just as bad. Identify your wiring and then actually work with it. Run the right information through the wiring so that you get the level of productivity that you need to have. So the idea is not, oh, everyone's got 2 hours, go make stuff. The idea is, if you got 2 hours and you feel this drive, but then you're frustrated, don't let yourself off the hook because of some dork at the New York Times. Like, that dude didn't take the day off to write that stupid ass article. Why should you take the day off from the stuff that matters to you? It's weird. It's like you gotta let yourself off the hook. It's just you gotta let yourself off the correct hook. I just think that people are wired certain ways, and Where misery comes from is when you try to run your life not with the wiring. I operate like an addict. If I didn't do the stuff I did, I would wreak havoc on my life. I know I would. I know that the way I am, I know that the way my family is, I know the way I relate to addicts. And so everything I do, I operate like an addict. That's not what art school taught me, right? Like art school taught me like, get in the studio, have an idea, refine it for 8 weeks. And like my process is like, fuck that, fuck that, fuck that, fuck that, fuck that. Like that's all, that doesn't work for me. Just abandon as many rules as possible and start going off of feelings. Like what's the feeling? Because the feeling is how the wiring is communicated to you. Joy tells you you're doing the right stuff. Let's see, John said, I suppose that's similar to how sketch artists say to be loose as opposed to trying to draw a perfect piece straight out of the box. Yeah, I mean, you don't need to draw a perfect thing right out of the box. You know, it's like weird. It's like I live really strongly by the idea of like you work the whole canvas. But I also think it could be interesting to be a lunatic that just tries to draw perfection right off the bat, but then you just got to be willing to let go. Or you got to be happy that it takes 7 years to make something. You know, both are kind of right. I'm going to put on the other side this Dawnbreed record so I can give my mouth a rest for a minute and drink some of my iced coffee. Perfection is the enemy of progress? Yeah. Perfection is the enemy, period. Oh man, I like this record a lot. I think the first record label I ran, the second record label I ran, we tried to get this band on the label. I don't remember what happened. It didn't work though. Let's see if we got anything cool in here. Nice little lyric booklet. This was definitely a thing in the punk scene at the time. The band's called Dawnbreed. The projects are never finished, they're abandoned. There's a thing I really like that Gerhard Richter talks about in Gerhard Richter painting, which is that the painting's done when you run out of moves. Like when you look at it and you go, I don't know what to do, that's when it's done. Might not feel finished in your heart, but your inability to make the next move, to where you think like if you do something, you'll ruin it, that's a good sign. And I think this is like another one that is good to me. Like in a workshop, I had a student talk about it frustrated her that when she did an illustration, she'd come up with a certain amount of time she thought it would take, and then it would always take 2 or 3 times longer, which, like, go figure, right? Everybody knows how that is. And I'd be like, okay, well, why don't you just start estimating and then multiply by 3, and then you'll know how long it will take. Yeah. And then she said, yeah, but I don't want to spend that much time on it. So, like, she says the illustration will take 3 hours, and then it takes 9, and she doesn't want it to take 9. And one of the things I proposed was like, how about as an experiment, you start setting a timer, and if you think it's going to take 3 hours, you just stop at 3, and whatever is there is done. And she's like, yeah, but it wouldn't be finished. And I'd be like, according to your process, it would be finished. It would be different than what you're used to, but think about the bizarro results you would get to if you just constantly were like, this gets 6 hours, done. This gets 72 hours, doesn't matter where it's at, done. Like, I think that would be kind of fantastic. For me, making stuff is fun enough that I don't really particularly care, but, you know, it's just like, why do you have to be governed by that same set of rules? It's a cool record. I really like it. I remember when I got this, I thought at this point this band was like kind of a metalcore band, and I thought by the time they got to this point they still were, but clearly this is more of like a kind of post-hardcore sort of deal. Nice, super good. I also love this like kind of 50s green sort of colors. Paul says, I know I'm done when the process begins to feel masturbatory. Yeah, I definitely dig that. I have a problem where I'm not afraid to ruin things half the time, and that makes it really difficult to finish things, because I always just kind of wonder what happens, like, what happens if I do this? And then I ruin it, and then I'm like, ah, shit. All right, this is now a new thing since I've ruined it. I never go back. Like, I never try to get back to where I was. I'm just like, all right, the adventure continues. Design is a lot different for me. So I'm sitting at this, like, let's see if we can see it on the edges here. There's a bunch of stuff hanging out of this underneath this board. They're basically drawings and collages on press sheets, and I routinely just ruin them and just like, oh man, I went too far. And they're like, all right, then I got to keep going. Luckily, I don't really care about anything, so it would be frustrating if it turned out that I was like really obsessed with it. But when it comes to design, music stuff, like my design documents will have, just as soon as I'm like, oh, that's kind of cool, I duplicate that artboard and then I do something else and then I duplicate that. So a lot of times, like when I'm working, like if I'm an illustrator, there might be 30 artboards and there'll be like 5 over here that basically look the same because there was like a little thing I wanted to look at, and I'm not super into hitting Command Z. Basically my files, they build up, then they sit, and then they come back down again because I go through and I go like, that and that looks the same, pick one, boom. That and that looks the same, pick one, boom. So this is this Shotmaker song, probably 1994. Shotmaker only around for 2 years. That's the cover. Something about asparagus. Split with Maximilian Kolbe. And this song is called New Sound System, and I really like it. That's what we're gonna play out on today. Hoping it's not raining. I want to go play outside with the kids now that this day is done. Thanks for hanging out for a long time tonight. This is a fun one. I think the versioning thing is one of the things too where my the sense of fun that I have with things tends to come through, which is that like every time I make something and I go, ooh, that's cool, part of me then wants to be like, oh, I wonder if I can make it cooler after this, and I kind of gotta go a little bit further, which if I didn't enjoy it would be a nightmare. But it's like I feel like you can make versions out of insecurity or you can make versions out of curiosity. It looks the same on the ground, but where they come from is really different. If you look back in your project file or folder is a mess, I know it's in the right headspace. I'm trying to think. My Illustrator files will be a mess. Awesome, I'm glad to hear that. And then if it's not clear, I'm doing this every weekday from 4 to 5 roughly. Yes, world's worst radio show. And the other thing is like if you have a question and you can't be here, you can always DM me. I mean, never mind the fact that I've been like talking to people on the phone constantly lately about these kind of things, like if somebody has a question, but I can also answer it, and then you can just see it later on the YouTube or watch the live afterwards. Thank you. Dude, I love FA. I was thinking about FA today. I love when I think it's somebody's got it. I guess there's a couple videos that show Dill's studio, which is basically just this empty room in a house just piled with magazines. Thanks, Paul. And I think one of the coolest thing, I think Dill is such a good example of this. Like, he's just got all these ideas. He's like, oh, I should paint a portrait of this skater with his family, even though I can't paint. Like, I love that. Yeah, I think FA hockey is so good. I love the videos that half the time they don't have music in them. You know what? Let's just put this at the beginning. This thing is so explosive right off the bat, and that's how we'll end this episode. What's this song called? Love this bass line. The Game is what this song is called. Shotmaker. Short-lived Canadian hardcore band. Alright, we're counting down. Thanks everybody. Maybe see you tomorrow.